Chapter 1. The Last Day.
It's the last day, even the last hour now. I'm an old man, lonely and unloved, sick and hurting, and tired of living. I am ready for death. It has to be better than this. I own this tall glass building, the land around it, and the 2,000 people who work here. I own silver in Nevada, coffee in Kenya, and coal in Angola. My company owns businesses that produce electricity, make computers, and print books. I'm worth more than $11 billion. The money is my greatest problem. I had 3 families, 3 ex-wives, who had 7 children. They're gathering here today because I'm dying, and it's time to divide the money. I don't care who gets the money, but I do care very much who doesn't get it. My first wife was Lillian. We married young. I was 24 and she was 18, and had 4 children. Her oldest boy is now 47. Troy Jr., or TJ, was thrown out of college when he was 19 for selling drugs. I gave him, like the others, $5 million on his 21st birthday. It ran like water through his fingers. TJ's brother, Rex, is 44. Our oldest daughter is Libigail, a child I loved desperately until she went to college and forgot about me. She married an African, and I took her name out of my will. Our younger daughter, Mary Ross, is married to a doctor. He wants to be super rich, but they're heavily in debt. All Lillian's children are the same. They're in debt and unemployable, and they want my money. After Lillian, I married my secretary, Janie, a beautiful young thing, 22 years younger than me. She had 2 children. The younger one, Rocky, was killed in a car with 2 of his friends. Her daughter, Gina, is married to a fool who could lose $500 million in 3 years. I married Tira when I was 64. She was 23 and pregnant with Ramble. He's now 14 and has already been arrested once for theft and once for possession of drugs. He has rings in his ears, eyebrows, and nose. Like the others, he expects to get rich, to get a fortune because I'm his father. I know these people. I watch them. Sneed appears from another room. He's been my servant for almost 30 years now. "How are you, sir?" he asks. I say nothing because I'm neither required nor expected to respond to Sneed. "Some coffee, sir?" "Lunch." Sneed expects to get rich, too. He wants me to die because he expects a few million. The trouble with having money is that everybody wants a little of it. Sneed's name is not mentioned in my will. He brings in my lunch, the final meal. Later, Sneed pushes my wheelchair out of the apartment, down the hall, through another door. The room is full of lawyers and psychiatrists who will decide whether I'm sane. There are cameras pointing at me. Every whisper, every move, every breath will be recorded. I'm sitting here to prove to the world that I am sane enough to psychiatrist. Their names are printed on cards in front of them. Dr. Zadell, Dr. Flo, Dr. Tyson. I study their eyes and faces. They expect me to be crazy. but I'm going to prove them wrong. Josh Stafford is speaking. My name is Josh Stafford, and I am the lawyer for Mr. Troy Phelan. The psychiatrists in this room will examine Mr. Phelan. If they believe that he is wholly sane, then he intends to sign a new will. Stafford taps his pencil on the thick will lying before us. My families haven't seen the will, so they can only guess what it contains. They believe that the money will be divided fairly among the children, with generous gifts to my ex-wives. Stafford prepared the will, and, with my permission, this is what he has implied. The psychiatrists begin their examination. Zadell goes first. Mr. Phelan, can you tell us the date, time, and place? I drop my chin to my chest like a fool and think about the question. Monday, December 9th, 1996. The place is my office. The time? About 2:30 in the afternoon, I say. And where is your office? McLean, Virginia. They ask many more questions. Then Tyshan says, What is your current physical condition? I'm sick. I have cancer. My doctors say I won't live more than 3 months. I can feel their excitement. The rumor has been confirmed. Are you under the influence of drugs or alcohol? No. Back to Zadell. Mr. Phelan, you have about $11 billion. Is that correct? Yes. Do you intend to sign a new will today? Yes, I do. Is that the will on the table in front of you? It is. Does that will leave a large part of your estate to your children? It does. Zadell places his pen on the table and looks at Stafford. In my opinion, Mr. Phelan is mentally capable of signing his will. Do you all agree? Stafford asks the other lawyers. Yes, absolutely. They nod their heads as fast as they can. Stafford slides the will to me and gives me a pen. I turn to the back and sign a name that nobody can read, then place my hands on top of it. This meeting is over, Stafford says, and everyone quickly leaves the room. One camera remains on me. I tell Sneed to take a seat at the table. Stafford and one of his partners, Durbin, are also seated. When we're alone, I produce an envelope from my pocket. I remove from it 3 pieces of yellow legal paper. Stafford, Durbin, and Sneed look confused. This is my real will, I announce, taking a pen. I wrote it a few hours ago, dated today, and now signed today. I write my name again. This replaces all previous wills, including the one I signed less than 5 minutes ago. I put the papers back in the envelope and push it across the table to Stafford. At the same time, I rise from my wheelchair. My legs are shaking. Just seconds now. Surely I'll be dead before I hit the ground. Hey, someone says, Sneed, I think. But I'm moving away from them. I walk, almost run, past a row of chairs to the big sliding doors which are unlocked. Stop! Someone shouts, and they're moving behind me. I grab the handle and open the door. The air is very cold. I step onto the narrow balcony and, without looking down, I throw myself over the edge.
Chapter 2. Troy Phelan's Testament.
Sneed reached the balcony just in time to scream in horror. Then he watched helplessly as Mr. Phelan fell silently, growing smaller and smaller until he struck the ground. Sneed stared in disbelief. Then he began to cry. Josh Stafford was a step behind him and witnessed most of the fall. It took him a minute or two to recover from the shock and start thinking like a lawyer again. He watched the family down below collect around Phelan's body. Then he went back into the room. The camera was still on. Sneed faced it, raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, then explained what he'd just witnessed. Stafford opened the envelope and held the yellow sheets of paper close enough for the camera to see. "Yes, I saw him sign that," Sneed said, "just seconds ago." "Did he say this was his last will and testament?" "He called it his testament." Stafford made Durbin repeat the same statement, then placed himself in front of the camera and gave his version of events. When he finished, he told Sneed to leave the room. Stafford turned back to the camera and looked at the sheets of yellow paper. The first sheet was a letter. Stafford spoke to the camera. "This letter is dated today, Monday, December 9th, 1996. It is addressed to me from Troy Phelan. I will read it in full. Dear Josh, I am dead now. These are my instructions, and I want you to follow them closely. First, I want a quick examination of my body. Second, there will be no funeral. I want to be cremated and my ashes scattered from the air over my ranch in Wyoming. Third, I want you to keep my will secret until January 15th, 1997. The law does not require you to produce it immediately. Goodbye. Troy." Stafford carefully picked up the second piece of paper. "This is a one-page document. It is the last testament of Troy L. Phelan. I will read it all. The last testament of Troy L. Phelan. To each of my children, Troy Phelan, Jr., Rex Phelan, Libigale Jeter, Mary Ross Jackman, Gina Strong, and Rambo Phelan, I give enough money to pay off any debts they have today. Their future debts will not be covered by this gift. If any of these children attempt to contest this will, then they will receive nothing. To my ex-wives, Lillian, Janie, and Tira, I give nothing. They were adequately provided for in the divorces. The rest of my estate I give to my daughter, Rachel Lane, born on November 2nd, 1954 in New Orleans, Louisiana, to a woman named Evelyn Cunningham, who is now dead." Stafford had never heard of these people. He paused, then went on. "I appoint my trusted lawyer, Josh Stafford, to carry out this will. Signed, December 9th, 1996, 3 p.m., by Troy Phelan." Stafford placed it on the table and picked up the third sheet. "This is a note addressed to me again. I will read it. Josh, Rachel Lane is a World Tribes missionary on the Brazil-Bolivia border. She works with an Indian tribe in a region known as the Pantanal. The nearest town is Corumbá. I couldn't find her. I've had no contact with her in the last 20 years. Signed, Troy Phelan." Stafford put down the last piece of paper and turned to Durbin. "He thought of everything." "He's a very cruel man," Durbin said. "Can you imagine the money those fools will spend in the next month? It seems a crime not to tell them. We can't. We have our orders." Outside Lillian's large house in Falls Church, a group of journalists waited on the street for a family member to come out.
Inside, Phelan's 4 eldest children gathered. They tried to be serious and sad. It was difficult. Fine wine was served, lots of it. By midnight, TJ and Rex were drunk, celebrating their fabulous day. Stafford met Tip Durbin, and together they drove to the medical examiner's office in McLean.
"The cause of death is obvious. There's no trace of alcohol or drugs," the medical examiner said. "And there was no sign of cancer. Troy was in good health at the time of his death." "Did he tell you he had cancer?" Durbin asked Stafford on the drive back. "Yes, several times."
"Why did he lie?"
"Who knows? Everybody thought he was dying."
"Why did he jump?"
"He was a very lonely old man." "It seems like a nasty trick," Durbin said. "He promises money to his family. The psychiatrists say that he isn't crazy. Then at the last minute he signs a different will."
"Why did he hate them so much?"
"They embarrassed him. They fought with him. They never earned an honest dime, and they spent many of his millions. Troy never planned to leave them anything."
Back at his office, Stafford talked to members of his team.
"You have to find a person who, I suspect, does not want to be found."
He told them what he knew about Rachel Lane. There wasn't much.
"First, find out about the World Tribes missions. Who are they? How do they operate? How do they pick their people? Where do they send them? Everything. Find out about her mother, Evelyn Cunningham. She's dead now. Find out all you can."
TJ nursed a sore head until noon, then drank a beer. He walked around his dirty apartment. He couldn't find his wife. He and Biff had been through 3 fights already that day. He opened another beer and looked at himself in the mirror in the hall.
"Troy Phelan, Jr.," he said. "Son of Troy Phelan, 10th richest man in America, worth $11 billion. Yes!"
He dressed in his best suit, a gray one he'd worn yesterday when dear old Dad faced the psychiatrists and performed so wonderfully.
"Armani, here I come,"
he whistled joyfully. Life had been soft and luxurious for the first 20 years, and then he received his inheritance. His $5 million had disappeared before he reached 30, and his father hated him for it.
"What can I do with $500 million?" he asked himself as he drove along the highway. 500 million tax-free! He began to laugh. His first stop was a BMW Porsche garage run by his friend Dickie. "Biff would like a Porsche, a red 911. "When?" Troy stared angrily at him. "Now!" "Sure, TJ. What about money?" "I'll pay for it the same time I pay for my black one. Also a 911. How much are they?" "About 90,000 each." "No problem. When can we have them?" "In a day or two." "When will you have the cash?" Dickie asked. "In a month or two, but I want the cars now." Dickie looked away. "Listen, TJ, I can't hand over 2 new cars without payment." "Fine. I'll go somewhere else. I could buy this whole garage, you know. I could walk into any bank right now and ask for 10 million or 20 million and buy this place. They would happily give me the money. Do you understand?" Dickie's eyes narrowed. "How much did he leave you?" "Enough to buy the bank. Are you giving me the cars or shall I go down the street?" "Let me find the cars." Rambo spent the day in his room, smoking, listening to music, and ignoring everyone. He hadn't been to school for weeks.
His lawyer had told him that the money would go into a trust until he was either 18 or 21. Until then, he would get a generous amount of money to spend every month. He would form a band called Ramble. He would play guitar and sing and chase girls. 2 floors up, Tira, his mother, spent the day on the phone chatting with friends. Most of them gossiped long enough to ask how much she might get from the estate, but she was afraid to guess. When she divorced Troy, she got $10 million and the house. She was now down to her last $2 million. Her needs were so great. Her friends had beach houses in the Bahamas, and she had to stay in luxury hotels. They bought their clothes in New York. She picked her clothes up locally. Their children went to the best schools, out of the way. Ramble was in the basement. Gina Phelan Strong was 30 and married to Cody, husband number 2. He had big dreams, but after 6 months, his businesses had made huge losses. The $5 million Troy gave Gina on her 21st birthday had shrunk to less than $1 million, and their debts were growing. Then Troy jumped from the window. They spent the morning looking for homes in Swink's Mill, the place of their grandest dreams. By dusk, they were looking at an empty house priced at $4.5 million, and seriously considering making an offer. Rex, age 44, brother of T.J., was under criminal investigation. A bank had failed, and the FBI was making fierce inquiries. He owed more than $7 million. Now Troy was dead, Rex could stop worrying. He could pay his debts and play with his money. He spent the day with Hark Geddes, his lawyer. He wanted the money quickly, desperately, and he pressured Geddes to call Josh Stafford. "We have to see that will," he shouted at Hark throughout the day. Hark calmed him with a long lunch and good wine. Amber, Rex's wife, dropped by and found them both drunk. She wasn't angry. She loved Rex more than ever now. Hark Geddes was excited. The old man was dead, and his crazy family was a lawyer's dream. This was his chance to start his own company and to make a lot of money. He wanted a long fight over the will, a fight that would make him famous and rich. According to the Internet, the World Tribes Mission's headquarters was in Houston, Texas. Their goal was to spread Christianity around the world, and they had 4,000 missionaries working with native peoples. 28 Indian tribes in Brazil were being ministered to by World Tribes missionaries. These missionaries received training in living in the jungle, languages, and medical skills. So Rachel lived in a hut and slept on a bed she'd built herself and cooked over a fire. She ate food she'd grown or trapped and killed, and taught Bible stories to the children and the adults. She knew nothing and certainly cared nothing for the worries and pressures of the world. "We may never find her," Durbin said. "No phones, no electricity. You have to climb through the mountains to get to these people." "We have no choice," Josh said. "We called the World Tribes Missions, and they won't tell us anything. They wouldn't even confirm that this woman exists. But I have an idea. We have to send someone to find Rachel Lane, right? And we can't just send anyone. It has to be a lawyer, someone who can explain what's happening. And it has to be someone from our company. But it's not going to be a quick trip. Brazil's a big country. We're talking jungles and mountains. These people have never seen a car. It might take at least a week." "So, who do we send?" Durbin asked.
What about Nate?
Nate O'Reilly was a partner who was at the moment locked away in a private hospital in the Blue Ridge Mountains. In the past 10 years, he'd been a frequent visitor to this hospital, each time trying to stop drinking and taking drugs. Now, at the age of 48, he had no money, was twice divorced, and the government was chasing him for non-payment of taxes. "He used to be an outdoor type, didn't he?" Durbin asked.
"Oh, yeah. Rock climbing, diving, all that crazy stuff. Then the slide into alcoholism began, and he stopped all that."
The slide had begun in his mid-30s. He was a star in the legal practice, but he began drinking heavily and using drugs. He ignored his family, and then he lost a lawsuit and fell apart. The firm sent him to a hospital to recover. He could stay clean for months, even years, but he always crashed. 4 months earlier, he'd locked himself in a hotel room with a bottle of vodka and a sack of pills. Josh sent him to the hospital for the 4th time in 10 years. "It might be good for him," Durbin said. "You know, to get away for a while." Chapter 3. Nate's Mission. Nate walked to his window and looked at the Shenandoah Valley 1,000 meters below. It was covered with new snow. He remembered that it was almost Christmas, and the thought saddened him. The kids were gone now, either grown or taken away by their mothers. The last thing Nate wanted was another Christmas in a bar with other drunks. Breakfast was black coffee, which he had with his nurse, Sergio. For the last 4 months, Sergio had also been his best friend. He knew everything about the miserable life of Nate O'Reilly. "Do you have a guest today? Mr. Stafford," Sergio said. "Wonderful." Josh had visited once a month. Nate was resting in his room when Josh arrived. "You look great," Josh said. "How you doing?" "I need to get out of here, Josh." "Your doctor says another week or 2. "Great. Then what? Can I come back to the company?" "Not so fast, Nate. You have a couple of problems. We can deal with the bankruptcy, but that still leaves the problem of your taxes." From 1992 to 1995, Nate had failed to report about $60,000 in other income. "So what am I supposed to do?" Nate asked. "Do you think I'm going to prison?" "Troy Phelan died," Josh said. And it took Nate a second to understand. "I didn't know. When did he die?" 4 days ago. Jumped out of a window. He'd just signed 2 wills. The first prepared by me, the second and last he wrote himself. Then he jumped. He left everything to an illegitimate daughter I've never heard of. I want you to find her." "Me?" "Yes. We don't know where she is." "How much did he—" "About $11 billion before taxes." "Does she know it?" "No, she doesn't even know he's dead." "Where is she?" "Brazil, we think. She's a missionary working with a tribe of Indians." "How long will I be gone?" Nate asked. "It's a wild guess, but I'd say 10 days. There's no hurry, and she might be hard to find." "What part of the country?" "West, near Bolivia. This mission she works for sends its people into the jungles, where they minister to Indians from the Stone Age." "You want me to find the right jungle, then walk into it to find the right tribe of Indians. I tell them I'm a friendly lawyer from the States, and they should help me find a woman who probably doesn't want to be found." "Something like that. Think of it as an adventure.
Someone has to go, Nate. A lawyer from our firm has to meet this woman face to face, show her a copy of the will, explain it to her, and find out what she wants to do next. It can't be done by a Brazilian lawyer.
And if I say no? Nate asked. Josh smiled.
We'll find someone else. Think of it as a vacation. You're not afraid of the jungle, are you?
Of course not.
Then go have some fun. You can leave next week.
I'll be there for the holidays. That's a great idea.
You want to miss Christmas? What about your kids?
There were 4 of them, 2 by each wife. 1 in graduate school and 1 in college, 2 in middle school. I haven't heard from them.
I'm sorry, Josh said.
He'd certainly heard from the families. Both wives had lawyers who'd called to ask for money. Nate's oldest child needed money for college fees. He'd called Josh not to ask about his father's health, but more important, to ask about his father's share of the firm's profits last year.
Is it in the Amazon? No, the Pantanal, the largest wetlands in the world.
What happens when I get back? Do I have my office? Am I still a partner?
I don't know, Nate. This is your 4th time in the hospital in 10 years. If you went back now, you'd go back to the office and be the world's greatest lawyer for 6 months. You'd ignore the old friends, the old bars, the old neighborhoods. You'd work, work, work. Then there'd be a crack somewhere. An old friend might find you, a girl from another life. You'll slide again. I don't want that to happen.
A couple of weeks in the Brazilian wetlands is beginning to sound good, Nate said.
So you'll go?
Yes. Josh left him a thick file on the Phelan estate and its mysterious new heir. And there were 2 books on the Indians of South America. Nate read for 8 hours. He was suddenly anxious to begin his adventure. When Sergio checked on him, he was sitting on the bed, papers around him, lost in another world.
It's time for me to leave, Nate said.
Yes, it is, Sergio replied. The heirs collected huge debts. They signed contracts for new houses. New cars were delivered. They hired people to find the right private jet and give advice about what horse to buy. Several lawyers were fired, and new ones were brought in to replace them. Landed on the desk of Judge F. Parr Wycliffe. He was thrilled to get such a famous lawsuit, and called Josh Stafford to introduce himself.
Is there a will?
Wycliffe asked.
Yes, there's a will. Where is it? When will the money be released? I have it, Josh said. My client asked me to wait until January 15th.
Why? The reason was simple. Troy wanted his greedy children to spend a lot of money before they found out he hadn't left them anything.
I have no idea, Josh said. What's in the will? I can't tell you. I'm a little sympathetic to the Phelan family, Wycliffe said. They have a right to know what's in the will. I think we should read it to them on December 27th.
Josh wanted to laugh. Gather them all together, the Phelans and their lawyers and their new friends. Make sure the newspapers know about it. He could hear the crying and the cursing as the Phelans tried to understand what their father had done to them. Suddenly, Josh couldn't wait.
The 27th's fine with me, he said. Good, Wycliffe said. I'll let everybody know. There are lots of lawyers. It helps if you remember that there are 6 kids and 3 ex-wives, so there are 9 principal sets of lawyers. I hope my courtroom is big enough. I suggest you read the will, Josh said.
Wycliffe intended to. He imagined what would happen. People crowded together, not a sound as the envelope was opened. This would be one of his finest moments, reading a will that gave away $11 billion.
I assume the will is interesting, the judge said.
It's very interesting. The judge actually smiled. As usual, Josh had carefully planned Nate's release. He arrived at the hospital with a bag full of clothes, a passport, tickets, and plenty of cash.
How do you feel?
Josh asked as they drove south. Could you stop at the nearest store?
Sure. Why?
I'd like to get some beer.
Very funny.
I'd kill for a tall Coca-Cola. Back in the car, Josh said,
Your flight goes to Sao Paulo. Then you'll go on to a city called Campo Grande.
Do these people speak English?
No, they're Brazilian. They speak Portuguese.
How big is Campo Grande?
500,000, but it's not your destination. From there, you'll catch a flight to a place called Corumbá. There you'll meet a lawyer named Valdir Ruiz. He speaks English. He's a very nice man.
What am I supposed to do with Valdir?
He's looking for a guide to take you into the Pantanal by boat. It's an area of swamps and rivers.
And snakes and alligators.
Relax.
Josh pointed to the bag behind the passenger seat.
Open that.
It was made of brown leather. Nate sat it on his knee and opened it.
Toys, he said. That's the latest cell phone. That's the latest computer. Look how small they are.
Wow. And I'm supposed to use these in the middle of a swamp with snakes and alligators watching?
When you find her, I want to know immediately.
What's this?
The best toy in the box. It's a satellite phone. You can use it anywhere on the face of the earth. Keep the batteries charged and you can always find me.
Do the Indians have electricity?
Of course not.
Then how am I supposed to keep the batteries charged?
You'll think of something.
In the crowded airport, they drank weak coffee and read newspapers. Josh was very conscious of the bar. Nate didn't seem to be.
Are you okay?
Josh asked.
I'm fine. I'm not waiting for you to leave so I can run over to the bar and drink vodka. I'm not worried about you, Josh lied.
Then go. I'm a big boy. They said goodbye at the gate. At midnight, somewhere over the Caribbean, Nate fell asleep. The second plane descended, and the pilot welcomed them to Campo Grande. Nate read his notes. 600,000 people. A center for the cattle trade. Lots of cowboys. Rapid growth. When he stepped from the plane, the heat hit him. 2 days before Christmas, and it was over 35 degrees. He slept most of the hour it took to reach Corumbá. Set on the Bolivian border, the city had 90,000 people and was the capital of the Pantanal. River traffic and trade had built the city and kept it going. It was a lazy, pleasant little town. Storekeepers sat outside their stores, waiting for customers and chatting with each other. Teenagers raced through the traffic on bikes. Children ate ice cream at sidewalk tables. Nate's room at the Palace Hotel was on the 8th floor. There was a narrow bed, a desk with a chair, a small refrigerator with bottled water and beer, and a clean bathroom. Nate stretched his tired body on the bed and went to sleep. Chapter 4. Into the Pantanal. Valdir Ruiz was a pleasant man, happy with life in the way most Brazilians tend to be. He worked efficiently in his small office, just him and a secretary. He was proud of his English. He produced a large air map and pointed to the Pantanal. No roads or highways. More than 100,000 kilometers of swamp. There were 4 red X's along the western edge of the map, near Bolivia. "There are tribes here," he said to Nate, pointing to the marks. "Guato and Ipicas." "How large are they?" Nate asked. "We don't really know," Valdir replied. His words very slow and careful. He was trying hard to impress the American with his English. 100 years ago, there were many more, but the tribes grow smaller. They have little contact with the outside world. Their culture hasn't changed for 1,000 years. Do we know where the missionaries are? It is difficult to say. Valdir pointed at 2 of the X's. These are Guato. There will probably be missionaries around here. You must understand that there are at least 20 different American and Canadian groups with missionaries in Brazil. It's easy to get into our country, and it's easy to move around. No one really cares who is out there and what they are doing. Nate pointed at Corumbá, then to the nearest red X. "How long does it take to get from here to there?" "By plane, about an hour. By boat, from 3 to 5 days. "Then where's my plane?" "It's not that easy," Valdir said. He pointed. "These are cattle farms. Only a few can be reached by boat, so they use small airplanes. The airstrips are marked in blue. Even if you flew into the area, you would have to use a boat to get to the Indians." "How good are the airstrips?" "They're all grass. Sometimes they cut the grass, sometimes they don't. The biggest problem is cows." "Cows?" "Yes, cows like grass. Sometimes it's hard to land because the cows are eating the airstrip." "Could I fly into the Pantanal, then rent a boat to find the Indians?" "No. The boats are here, in Corumbá. So are the guides." "I'd like to fly over the area," Nate said. Valdir rolled up the map. "I can arrange an airplane and a pilot." "What about a boat?" "I'm working on that. This is the flood season, and most of the boats are in use. The rivers are up. I must warn you that air travel can be dangerous. The planes are small, and if there is engine trouble, well, there's no place to put a plane down in an emergency. A plane went down a month ago. They found it near a river, surrounded by alligators." "What happened to the passengers?" Nate asked, afraid of the answer. "Ask the alligators." They walked to the window and watched the traffic. "I think I have found a guide," Valdir said. "He's a young man, just out of the army. He speaks English very well. His father was a river pilot." Across the street was a small bar with 3 tables on the sidewalk. A red sign advertised beer. 2 men shared a table with a large bottle of beer between them. It was perfect. A hot day, a party mood, a cold drink enjoyed by 2 friends. Nate's head began to spin. His heart was beating fast, and his breathing stopped. His hands shook. He could taste the beer. The slide was beginning. He took a deep breath. The moment would pass. He thanked Valdir and left the office. He walked toward the river and found a small park. The late afternoon was humid. His shirt was stained with sweat and stuck to his chest. What happened back at Valdir's office had scared him. He sat on the edge of a picnic table and looked at the great Pantanal lying before him. A musician began to play his guitar as the sun sank slowly over the Bolivian mountains, not far away. A pilot agreed to fly, but he wanted to leave early and be back in Corumbá by noon because it was Christmas Eve. Valdir had hired a guide called Javi. He was 24, single and strong. He ran into the Palace Hotel wearing a bush hat, shorts, black army boots, and a shiny knife in his belt. Nate liked him immediately. His truck was old, but ready for the jungle. They roared through the streets of Corumbá, slowing only slightly at red lights, completely ignoring stop signs. Javi talked as he held the wheel like a race driver. Nate didn't hear a word. His heart stopped at each new intersection. The airport was empty. The pilot's name sounded like Milton. He was friendly enough, but it was obvious he didn't want to fly or work on the day before Christmas. "Do you feel safe?" Nate asked Javi when the pilot announced he was ready. Javi laughed and said, "No problem. This man has 4 small children and a pretty wife. Why would he risk his life?" Corumbá was immediately beneath them. To the east and north, a dozen small rivers spun circles around and through each other. Because of the floods, the rivers were full, and in many places ran together. In the west were the distant mountains of Bolivia. The sky was darker beyond the mountains. Milton dropped to 4,000 meters to stay below the clouds. He was worried about the dark sky. "We'll watch it for a few minutes," Javi said. Milton wanted to go home, but Nate at least wanted to see the Indian villages. He still held the faint hope that he could somehow fly to meet Rachel and take her back to Corumbá, where they could have lunch in a nice cafe and discuss her father's case. Raindrops began hitting the windows of the plane, and Milton dropped to 3,000 meters. From over the mountaintops, the storm rushed at them. The winds hit the plane, and it dropped suddenly. Nate's head hit the top of the cabin. He was very frightened. "We're turning around!" Javi shouted. Sweat covered Milton's forehead. The plane moved hard to the right. The sky toward Corumbá was black. Milton turned quickly east and said something to Javi. "We can't go to Corumbá," Javi shouted. "He wants to look for a farm. We'll land and wait for the storm to pass." Nate looked out of his window and saw nothing. No nice little farms with long airstrips. The plane dropped 100 meters in less than 2 seconds. Milton pushed the plane down toward the ground. Thunder, just above them, sounded like a gun in a dark room and shook them to their bones. Nate caught sight of a river just below them, and he suddenly remembered the alligators. He didn't want to crash into a swamp. Milton descended to 300 meters, where the ground could be seen in patches. Nate saw a white object below and shouted and pointed, "A cow! A cow!" They had seen the airstrip too late to land with the wind, so Milton turned the plane to land in the face of the storm. Nate saw a boy with a stick running through the tall grass, and he saw a cow running away from the airstrip. He saw Javi staring through the window, eyes wild, mouth open, but no words coming out. They hit the grass. The wind lifted them into the air, and then they hit the ground again. "Cow! Cow!" The plane crashed into a large, curious cow, and turned violently, all the windows bursting open, all three men screaming their last words. Chapter 5. The Slide. Nate woke up covered in blood. It was still raining. Milton and Javy were lying on top of each other, but moving and struggling to get out of their seats. Nate found a window and stuck his head out. The plane was on its side, with a wing cracked and folded under the cabin. Blood was everywhere, but it was from the cow, not the passengers. The boy with a stick led them to a small stable. Out of the storm, Milton dropped to his knees and began to pray. They sat in the dirt for a long time, watching the rain, hearing the wind, thinking of what could have been, saying nothing. Marco, the owner of the cow, appeared an hour later and began a heated discussion with Javy and Milton about the value of the cow. "I'll pay for the creature," Nate said to Javy. Javy asked the man how much, then said, $100. "Does he take American Express?" Nate asked. But the humor missed its mark. "I'll pay it." He'd pay as much as that to stop Marco complaining. The deal was settled, and the man became their host. When he realized Nate was from the States, he sent for his wife and kids. They ate rice and black beans around a small table. The children sat on the floor beside the table, eating bread and rice, watching every move Nate made. Marco had a small boat with a motor. The Paraguay River was 5 hours away. Maybe he had enough gasoline, maybe he didn't. But it would be impossible to get there with all three men in the boat. Javy had a plan. There was an army base on the edge of Corumbá. When the sky cleared, Nate carefully unpacked the satellite phone and turned on the power. The signal was strong, and Marco and his family gathered around. He wondered if they'd ever seen a phone. Javy called a friend who found phone numbers. He then explained the situation to an army officer and asked for help. After all, they had had a plane crash. Finally, the commander himself came to the phone. He and Javy traded army talk for 5 minutes, places they'd been to, people they knew. Then Javy explained what had happened. "No problem. A helicopter is ready. Give us an hour," the commander said. Milton smiled for the first time that day. An hour passed. The sun was dropping quickly in the west. Dusk was approaching. The army would not be able to rescue them at night. It was Tomás, the youngest child, who heard the sound first. He said something, then stood and pointed. The sound grew louder, and they saw the helicopter. When it landed, 4 soldiers jumped down and ran to the group. Nate knelt among the boys and gave them each $10. Then he picked up his bag and ran to the helicopter. It was dark in Corumbá when they flew over the city half an hour later. They landed at the army base west of town, where the commander met them and received their thanks. He sent them away in a military vehicle driven by a young soldier. As they entered the city, the car stopped in front of a small grocery store. Javy walked inside and returned with 3 bottles of beer. He gave one to Milton and one to Nate. After a slight hesitation, Nate took off the cap. The beer was very wet and cold and thoroughly delicious. And it was Christmas. He could handle it. The first stop was the hotel. Nate went to his room, where he undressed and stood in the shower for 20 minutes. There were 4 cans of beer in the refrigerator. He drank them all in an hour, assuring himself that this was not a slide. Things were under control. He'd cheated death, so why not celebrate? No one would ever know. A few beers here and there, what was the harm? The phone woke him. His neck, shoulders, and waist were already dark blue, neat rows of bruises where he had hit the side of the plane. "How are you?" It was Valdir. "JV said he thought you were okay." "I'm fine, just a little sore." "Very well. I have some good news. I rented a boat yesterday." "Good. When do I go?" "Maybe tomorrow. They're getting it ready. JV knows the boat." "I'm anxious to get on the river, especially after yesterday." Nate got up and moved slowly around the room. He saw the empty beer cans in the wastebasket. He would deal with that later. This was not a slide. He had nearly died yesterday, and that changed things. Every day was a gift now. Why not enjoy its pleasures? Just a little beer and wine, nothing stronger. Nate dressed and walked into town. The stores were locked, and the streets were empty. He went back to the park and looked down at the great Pantanal in front of him. Somewhere in the vast wetlands before him was Rachel Lane. She would soon be one of the richest women in the world. How would she react to the news of her good fortune? The possible answers made him uncomfortable. They had learned little about Rachel. Evelyn Cunningham, her mother, was from the small town of Delhi, Louisiana. When she was 19, she moved to Baton Rouge and found a job as a secretary in one of Troy Phelan's companies. She was a beautiful woman, and Troy spotted her during one of his visits from New York. Within a few months, Evelyn was pregnant. Troy's people arranged for Evelyn to go to a hospital in New Orleans, where Rachel was born in November 1954. Evelyn never saw her child. Troy arranged for the quick, private adoption of Rachel by a minister and his wife in Montana. Evelyn took $10,000 and returned to Delhi. She moved in with her parents, rarely left the house, and began to miss her daughter. She wrote letters to Troy, none of which were answered. As the years passed, Evelyn became more and more depressed. She killed herself on November 2nd, 1959, on Rachel's 5th birthday. She drove her parents' car to the edge of town and jumped off a bridge. Rachel was an only child. Her adoptive father, Mr. Lane, died when she was 17. Troy re-entered her life as she was finishing high school. Maybe he felt guilty. Maybe he was worried about her college education and how she would afford it. Rachel knew she was adopted, but had never shown an interest in her real parents. Troy met Rachel sometime in the summer of 1972. 4 years later, she graduated from the University of Montana. Gaps appeared in her history after that. Nate suspected that only 2 people could tell him about the relationship. One was dead. The other was living like an Indian somewhere out there, on the banks of one of 1,000 rivers. Nate walked down the block. A car stopped next to him, and JV leaned out. "Let's go for a ride," he said. "I want you to see the boat. My father was a boat captain." "Where is he now?" Nate asked. "He drowned in a storm." Wonderful, Nate thought. They stopped at the edge of the riverbank to admire their boat, the Santa Lura. "How do you like it?" JV asked. "I don't know," Nate replied. The boat was at least 80 meters long, with 2 decks. It was larger than Nate expected. There was a small boat tied to the back, which had paddles and a motor. "No other passengers?" Nate asked. "No, just you, me, and Welly, the deckhand who can cook." Nate walked to the back of the boat where there was a hammock. "This is yours," Javy said. "You'll have lots of time to read and sleep." Nate sat carefully in the hammock, then swung around until he was fully inside it. Javy gave him a push, then left to have another chat with the mechanic. Late in the afternoon, Nate stopped at a small store a few blocks from the hotel. He walked in to find a beer, maybe two. He was alone on the far side of the world. It was Christmas, and he had no one to share it with. A wave of loneliness fell upon him, and Nate began to slide. He saw the bottles of alcohol, all full and unopened. His mouth was dry. He grabbed the counter and thought about Sergio back at the hospital, and Josh, and the ex-wives, and the ones he'd hurt so many times when he crashed. Nate pointed at the vodka. 2 bottles. He walked back to the hotel. It would be dark in an hour, and Corumba was gently coming to life. The sidewalk cafes and bars were opening. A few cars moved about. Nate went to his room, where he locked the door and filled a tall plastic cup with ice. He placed the bottles side by side and opened one. He slowly poured the vodka over the ice and promised himself that he wouldn't stop until both were empty. Chapter 6. Legal Challenges. Next morning, Javy drove to the river and parked near the water's edge. The Santa Laura hadn't moved. He was pleased to see that Welly had arrived. Welly wasn't yet 18, but claimed he could cook, pilot, guide, clean, and navigate. Javy knew he was lying. "Have you seen Mr. O'Reilly?" Javy asked. "The American? No sign of him." Javy drove downtown to the hotel to find Nate. The girl at the front desk hadn't seen Mr. O'Reilly. She phoned his room and no one answered. Javy persuaded her to give him the key. The door was locked but unchained, and Javy entered slowly. The first thing he noticed was the empty bed. Then he saw the bottles. One was empty, and the other half-filled. He saw a bare foot, then stepped closer to see Nate lying between the bed and the wall. Javy gently kicked his foot, and the leg moved. At least he wasn't dead. Javy pulled Nate up from the floor and rolled him onto the bed. His eyes were swollen and still closed, his hair wild, his breathing slow. "Nate!" Javy said loudly. "Speak to me!" No response. In the bathroom, he wet a towel with cold water, then wrapped it around Nate's neck. Nate opened his mouth in an effort to speak. "Where am I?" he said, his tongue thick and sticky. "In